As for tonight, we are here to welcome Rick Quinn with Scott Sheets in conversation. Rick's book is what we are celebrating this evening. I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Rick was born and raised in Arizona and earned a degree in anthropology, then hit the road, indulging in admittedly peculiar whims by hitchhiking to Tierra del Fuego. In one way or another, he's been on the road ever since, living in a dozen diverse locales from Paris to Peru, San Francisco to Washington, D.C., working as a photographer, a coffee farmer, a magazine writer, a postman, a novelist, and, until his recent retirement, a financial systems expert with the Postal Service. Rick is a veteran road tripper who has driven both the Alaska Highway and the Pan American. So that is probably the most interesting bio I have read on this page. And tonight we are going to be learning more about his book of scenic road trips through Arizona and New Mexico. And in conversation with him will be our friend Scott Sheets, who is a person very worth knowing. Sheets previously served as the editor-in-chief of both Las Vegas City Life and the Las Vegas Weekly, and managing editor of Las Vegas Life magazine. He has edited 4 anthologies of fiction and essays about Vegas, and served as the assistant editor of Nevada's official sesquicentennial book. He's currently the deputy editor of Desert Companion magazine, where he edits a lot of really fabulous work that you should be reading if you are not reading it already, including an article that was nominated for James Beard Award, which we talked about a few weeks ago. Yeah. Anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to welcome, are we welcoming both up at the same time? Or
yes.
Yeah, I'm going to welcome up Rick Quinn and Scott Sheets.
When they gave me Rick's book, I started looking through it, and it's full of like these fabulous photos of just like empty highways. And every time I come to one, like I get this sort of itch in between my shoulder blades, like it's time to hop in the car. So I want to start out with sort of a general question, which would be, what is the allure of the road trip?
To me, it's basically the only way to travel. To put a destination in context, you have to get there by road. It puts you in touch with all the stuff that's in between point A and point B. As he mentioned, when you're flying somewhere, it's kind of like going to the DMV and coming out in a different city. That's really the truth. You have no idea of where you really are because you didn't have to work to get there. So to me, it's really cool.
As Drew indicated in his bio of you, you've traveled a lot. Do you have any idea what first sort of set that desire to travel into you?
When I was in college, I did a lot of traveling. As was mentioned, I have a degree in anthropology, and I spent several years living in South America. My field work was in Colombia back many years ago. At one point, I actually shipped a 4-wheel drive truck down to South America and spent 2 years driving all over the Andes. I kind of sort of put a fire in my belly, I guess you could say, and I've done quite a lot of travel since. What's the best way to put this? I sort of took a hiatus from all that sort of thing for about 35 years to have a regular job and raise a family, and at this point I've got a wonderful daughter and some grandkids and all the rest of that stuff. When I retired, I sort of picked up where I left off with the adventurous traveling. That's when I went to Alaska and did a lot of other things.
How many days or months or weeks a year would you say that you're on the road?
These days, not so many because I'm busy writing a book. It's one of the things that I most love to do. We have lives and other things we have to worry about too.
Well, turning to this book, my first question is, what made you choose Arizona and New Mexico when you could have easily been Utah and Colorado, where I will be road tripping? I could really use that book.
Yeah.
How did you come on these 2 states?
I was born in Arizona, raised in Arizona. I know Arizona pretty intimately, so it was kind of a natural thing to write a book about Arizona, and I wanted to expand the territory to give myself more breadth. New Mexico is a place that I've always enjoyed, and I didn't know it nearly well enough, so this was my opportunity to get to know New Mexico. And I almost certainly did accomplish that goal.
In the introduction, you describe yourself sort of like, squirreling away with a bunch of maps and research materials about the places you were going to check out. Did anything surprise you when you actually got out on the road, things that weren't reflected in the maps or the research?
Most definitely, because there's stuff out there that you'd never notice if you weren't there. The nature of the roads, the emptiness of some of those roads, that's another thing that you mentioned. It really surprised me how empty some of that country is. You travel on the interstate highway, and it's just a constant stream of traffic. You get on some of the smaller roads, you can have the whole thing to yourself. It's just awesome.
So the solitude is part of it for you?
That's part of it. Yes, absolutely. Getting out in the country where there aren't a lot of people and getting close to nature in a place where you're not in a crowd.
Were there destinations that you came upon that you didn't expect?
Yeah, there's a few of them. There's a place in northern Arizona called Coal Mine Canyon that I had never personally heard of until I actually saw it. It's not advertised anywhere to speak of anyway. There's no signage, there's no development. It's on the border between the Navajo Reservation and the Hopi Reservation. And to find it, I explained in the book, it's between two different mileposts on a particular state highway, and you look for a windmill. And then you take a little dirt road past the windmill, careful not to disturb the cows that are out there, and you come to a overlook, and there's this canyon that looks like Bryce Canyon in Utah. It's awesome.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me that I never knew, just in thumbing through this, is that there actually is a road to get you to the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
Right.
Which I never knew, and it's, you describe it as being more suitable for four-wheel drives and so on, or trucks. I drive a Fiat, but I'm thinking of trying it. It sounds really cool.
What you need is good clearance. I discovered, it's kind of interesting the way I discovered that road. I was on one of those rafting trips that takes you down the Colorado River through all the rapids and all that stuff. 8 days on a raft. Day 7, we come around a bend and there's vehicles on the riverbank, and I'm thinking, how the heck did they get there? So I looked into it, and I actually got on Google Earth, right, and I'm zooming in trying to find a road that actually went down to the river, and I did. And then I did a little more research, and I found out how do you actually travel that road. You need a permit from the Indian tribe that owns the land. And I went ahead and I tried it, and into the book it went.
Now, you organize the book in an interesting way. It's all of the trips begin and end on an interstate, and like the end of one is the beginning of another. So you could more or less like hopscotch your way from clear across Utah, or Arizona or New Mexico on these different side trips. How did you come to hit on that particular organization?
Well, it was kind of a way to make it work, because the trips were supposed to be day trips. I mean, you're supposed to be able to drive these things in about a day. And I had these destinations that were here, there, and everywhere. So the question was, where's the trip supposed to start? If it's supposed to be a day long, where do you start? You can't start every trip in a city. So I came up with this as a possible alternative, and I started working with it, and a pattern sort of grew. And when you look at the book, the inside cover shows the whole territory and all the routes, the way they connect together. And it became very deliberate. I mean, I started with one route that was an alternative to Interstate 17 between Phoenix and Flagstaff. And I liked the way that worked, so I tried doing similar stuff in other parts and managed to hook them all together. It was kind of nice.
Were there any cool destinations you had to leave out because it didn't quite fit that?
Of course.
That
And there was also limitations on how many words could be in a chapter. So in some cases, I had to leave stuff out on that basis. There was a whole entire chapter that was pretty well developed that I had to leave off because I hit my maximum. I couldn't have more than 25 of them. So yeah, there were a few destinations that didn't fit. They were too far away from everything else, or the surrounding area just wasn't sufficiently interesting.
Do you have if you had to pick a personal favorite from these trips, could you do it?
Everybody always asks me that. And that's a tough one because, different different side trips kind of fit different moods. If I had a personal favorite, it would probably be the one that includes Canyon de Chelly, because I'm really fond of that part of the world. The Four Corners area, the Navajo Reservation. That particular route includes not only Canyon de Chelly, but also Monument Valley, another one of my favorite places. So that particular route is a real stunner. I mean, it's something that I think everybody should try.
Is there something about the Southwest that lends itself to road tripping?
Oh, absolutely. How else are you going to get there?
But, I mean, so how is it, is there a lot of mountainous terrain that you cover on this, or is
You
it
bet
mostly?
there is. No, there's everything that's in the Southwest is also in this book. Mountains are important to these routes because if I look at a map and I see a really squiggly line, I want to go there. So there's a lot of roads like that are in this book, and I tend to veer off into the mountains. In southern Arizona, there's a phenomenon, not a phenomenon, but it's a geological thing called sky islands. The mountains are so tall that their climate at the top of the mountain is different from everything at the base. And they're kind of like islands in the sense that there are unique plants and animals that have developed in these isolated ecosystems. And there are several places where you could drive all the way up to the top of them. The mountain outside of Tucson is one example. Mount Lemmon, you can drive to 9,000 feet. Mount Graham outside of Safford, you can drive to about 8,500 feet. In some cases the roads are paved, in some cases they're dirt, but you get to, they liken the trip up Mount Lemmon to from a drive from Canada all the way, or from Mexico all the way to Canada. You pass through so many different climate zones, just in the space of 30 miles.
In the book, you advise people not to rely solely on GPS as they're charting their the way through these road trips.
If you've ever used a GPS in a really remote location, I want to explain why it's a bad idea. Because they will take you down washes and things that aren't even roads. I mean, seriously, you have to know where you're going.
A friend and I were jeeping outside of Sedona, and he had his GPS on, and we were basically a little dot in a sea of white because it couldn't find any roads or anything.
But there you were.
To contextualize it. Well, speaking of remoteness, I mean, there's always, I suppose, on the road trip, the possibility of breaking down, wrong turns, that sort of problematic development. Do you worry much about that when you travel?
If you worry too much about that kind of thing, you'll never go anywhere. That's the way I figure it. There's no place in this part of the world that is so isolated that there won't be somebody coming along at some point. So what you've got to do is make sure you've got water, make sure you've got some food. I talk about this in the introduction to the book, things that you need to be prepared with. If you're traveling in an isolated area, you need to be prepared to be self-sufficient for a couple of days just in case. But aside from that, why not go?
Do you have ideal road trip companions? Is it good for families, or do you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. My wife and I love to take road trips together. When my daughter was small, that was our favorite kind of vacation. Was a road trip, and these things are, for the most part, very family friendly. There's a few, like the Diamond Creek Road down to the Grand Canyon, that are a little more rugged, but you can take a family down there too, as long as your vehicle is appropriate to drive. There's a lot of different kind of things for different tastes. I go into lots of the nature conservancy sites, and there's a lot of sites that are ideal for people that are into bird watching and that kind of stuff. Stuff that's good for kids, all the national parks, all the national monuments, that kind of thing, always included. If they're anywhere close, I'll have that.
Lots of sort of wacky man-made stuff along the way.
There is.
There's a great photo in here of some green sculpture.
Gigantic Giganticus, yes. It's on the old Route 66, one of the roadside attractions. It's about, I don't know, I guess about 10 or 12 feet tall, made mostly out of cement. It's bright green. Looks kind of like one of those Easter Island sculptures.
How many, did you find a lot of those sort of oddities along the way?
There's definitely quirky stuff out there. I've got the world's smallest museum in there. The whole thing is located inside of about 100 square foot tough shed.
What's it a museum of?
Everyday life.
I can put my everyday life in a tough shape. So what are you working on next?
Lots of personal projects for the next year or so. I'm going to be pretty busy doing a lot of personal projects.
One reason the road trip, the idea of the road trip sort of retains its potency as a cultural mythology is the potential for discovery of new places, different people, and even maybe things about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any sort of those big life-changing sort of experiences on the road?
Most definitely. When I retired after 35 years of working that regular job, the first thing I did was I took off and I took a road trip to Alaska and back by myself. And by the end of that trip, I knew darn good and well that I was retired. Something was very, very different with the way I felt about life.
You put 11,000 miles on your
Yes, in the course of researching this book, I drove 11,000 miles on back roads. If you add up all the mileage in the book, it comes up to about 6,500. So there was a lot of doubling back and round and figuring stuff out until I got it just the way I wanted it to be.
Do you have any idea what your total road trip lifetime mileage would be?
Oh, it's got to be in the 500,000 range easy.
Well, I hope I can say that at some point. Anybody else, any questions from the audience while we have them here? Go ahead.
Me? Oh, I saw that at the beginning that you drive a Jeep Cherokee.
I do.
Big fan of Jeep Cherokees. Did you ever have a situation when you're driving your life, this is going to be cutting it close?
Not really. Not really. I mean, I wouldn't get to do that with people. I wasn't going to put anyone in a position where they're going to be questioning whether they're going to be able to do it.
But some of this was you going out and finding places.
Absolutely.
So-
And I had to make sure that it was going to be suitable,
Right.
or it wouldn't be included. in
So
the
that's
book.
what
There were
did you
a
ever
few-
come to a point where it's like, no, this is too much, I can't put this in the book, I can't go here, let me turn around.
Well, I did my research pretty carefully in advance,
Okay.
so I wasn't looking for Jeep trails. I was looking for, well, there's plenty of unpaved roads in the book, but they're generally speaking state highways. They may not be as well maintained as the paved roads, but they're still state highways.
Do you think there's a reason that Arizona and New Mexico have more interesting places than other states? I thought it might be because of the interstate highway system came there later than elsewhere.
I think not so much. There's a lot of empty country in Arizona and New Mexico, and geological splendor. I mean, where else are you going to find something like the Grand Canyon? And as far as history, New Mexico's got it all over just about anything else in North America. I mean, they've had, wow, I mean, you can go back more than 500 years in New Mexico and find families that have been there that whole entire time. To me, that's really interesting.
You have a question?
I just wondered where your home base is now?
In Phoenix.
So Rick talked about traveling on the Hopi land and
Yes, I do go fairly extensively into the etiquette of traveling on Native American reservations. They are, in essence, sovereign nations. And they have their own set of laws, they have their own set of rules, they have their own customs and restrictions. Photography, for the most part, is disallowed in most Native American towns. If you're so fortunate as to witness like a Hopi ceremony where they're doing the dances, they don't want you even taking notes. You're perfectly welcome to observe respectfully at a distance. Don't interfere with anything. Don't get in the way. But record it in your brain and not on a computer chip. That's what they would prefer. It's a really beautiful country, and the people are amazing. The Hopi in particular have been in the same location for 2,000 years, and they are the least assimilated of all the Native American tribes.
As a New Mexico native, how do you define a side trip as opposed to main trip?
It's a side trip. These are scenic alternatives to the interstate highways. So in that sense, it's a side trip off the interstate. For the folks that normally travel on interstates only, It's a way to get out there to the mountain, into the countryside, the mountains, and all that beyond those interstate highways.
So the entire southern half of New Mexico
Oh, it's
is like,
covered.
it's like
Yeah.
one big side trip then?
And no,
Essentially?
there's a bunch of them that kind of go up and down off of Interstate 10. And there's another set that goes up and down off of Interstate 40, and there's another set that goes back and forth from Interstate 25. So it pretty well covers most of the more interesting parts of the state.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean, but I mean, it assumes that like you're going somewhere else and then you kind of like get off on a.
There are also
You know.
fabulous day trips from the major cities.
Okay.
In fact, there's one that never leaves the Tucson area. It circles the Tucson area. It goes up to the top of the mountain through both parts of Saguaro National Park, takes in some of the old Spanish missions, the Sonora Desert Museum, all the best that Tucson has to offer, all in one big loop. It's about 160 miles, but you're never more than about 20 miles from the middle of town.
Yes.
Did you come across any interesting wildlife while you were traveling?
Oh, you bet. You find herds of pronghorn antelope out there in New Mexico. You find lots and lots of elk in the White Mountains of Arizona, and in some of the areas in the Sangre de Cristos in New Mexico. There's still a lot of deer, a lot of elk, and a lot of antelope. And the Bosque del Apache, down south of Albuquerque, near Socorro, is one of the premier locations for birders. There's a sandhill crane migration that comes in here every year. And thousands and thousands and thousands of snow geese and cranes and other types of waterfowl. If you're out there at the right time of day, right at sunup, you can witness what they call the daily flyout, where every single one of those ducks and geese takes off out of the water simultaneously. It's over in about 30 seconds and it's completely breathless.
Did you meet any strange characters along the way as part of this research?
Most of them are riding with me. Not so much. I mean, most of the people I met along the way were really, really good people, very helpful when I had questions about something. And for the most part, when you get off the beaten path, the people you run into are like-minded, and for the most part, easy to get along with.
Is there a question over here?
When you talked earlier about all of these roads that you covered that they are highways, even if they are dirt roads, is that thanks to the feed to the Arizona system? Because I was very impressed with, one time when we drove from Sedona down to further south, I said, gee, it's too bad we're going to this Jerome and Cottonwood, and we didn't though. The road went through them, even though the road was about bicycle path width at Jerome. And the road, where there would be an intersection, there'd be a roundabout. I felt like they'd done some good planning.
They have. It took them a while to get there, but yeah, they have. When I'm speaking of state highways that are dirt, I'm speaking primarily of New Mexico. There's a number of them that are questionable in bad weather.
Was there a question?
Yeah, I had a question. As a New Mexico native, how do you define side trip as opposed to main trip?
It's a side trip. These are scenic alternatives to the interstate highways. So in that sense, it's a side trip off the interstate. But the folks that normally travel on interstates only, it's a way to get out there to the mountain, into the countryside, the mountains, and all that beyond those interstate highways.
So the entire southern half of New Mexico
Oh,
is
it's
like
covered.
it's like
Yeah.
one big side trip then?
And no,
Essentially.
there's a bunch of them that kind of go up and down off of Interstate 10. And there's another set that goes up and down off of Interstate 40, and there's another set that goes back and forth from Interstate 25. So it pretty well covers most of the more interesting parts of the state.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean, but I mean, it assumes that like you're going somewhere else and then you kind of like get off on a.
There are also
you know.
fabulous day trips from the major cities.
Okay.
In fact, there's one that never leaves the Tucson area. It circles the Tucson area. It goes up to the top of the mountain through both parts of Saguaro National Park, takes in some of the old Spanish missions, the Sonora Desert Museum, all the best that Tucson has to offer, all in one big loop. It's about 160 miles, but you're never more than about 20 miles from the middle of town.
Through New Mexico and Arizona, does much of Route 66 still exist?
There's a 100-mile segment of Route 66 that's still intact. It runs between Kingman and Saluda, Arizona, actually Kingman and Ashford. And that's included in the book of one of those side trips. In fact, when we're talking about that road that goes down to the Grand Canyon inside the, or it goes down to the Colorado River inside the canyon, you get to that off of Old Route 66.
Okay. And the second part, I don't know how to ask this question exactly, but I worked in Southern California Mojave Desert for years. I did a lot of trips up 390 spots. I was trying to talk with a friend who's coming out in August about West Line about these desert communities I really like. Like, and I don't know if you've heard of these, Darwin, Franzburg, which is a living ghost town, or Slab City, there's an RV park that comes alive every winter.
They're in the Mojave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of communities that are like artist communities? I know towns, of course, but
Bisbee.
Bisbee one.
B-I-S-B-E-E. It's an old mining town.
Okay.
Jerome in Arizona, there's a lot of artists and craftsmen that have kind of settled in there. There's on the backside of the Sandias, that's the backdrop for Albuquerque, there's a route called the Turquoise Trail that runs through a town called Madrid. And that's an artist and craftsman community as well. You see lots of interesting artwork and jewelry.
Are all of these fairly friendly to visitors?
Well, absolutely, they're dependent upon visitors because, yeah, they're all selling stuff.
I'm not sure Darwin.
Okay, those old desert rats out there.
Yeah.
Some of them are, yep.
Any more questions? Yes.
I think the photos in your book are lovely. I'm wondering, are there any that are a particular source of pride for you that would be difficult to capture?
Well, there's a few that are like that, yeah. I've got one of the Virgin River in Zion National Park. It's actually kind of a standard shot, but I'm still proud of it. There's another one on the backside of Shiprock that was taken right at the moment of sunset, about 10 seconds later than this. And that was just stunning. Yeah.
I have one other, I was struck by how some of these trips, the distance between two cities by the interstate would be only a matter of a couple of hours, and the distance by the way you went,
More like 10?
more like that would see. I could have figured this out myself, but what's the greatest ratio between any of those trips, you know?
I'd say it's probably the one that runs between Lordsburg and Wilcox. Because on the interstate, it's a very short distance, but I take it all the way up into the White Mountains of Arizona and then back down US 191. And it's a long dang way north to get a little bit of distance west.
How long does it take by your route?
It's a good 10 hours if you do nothing but drive it.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
One more?
Yeah, I'm gonna follow up on the question she stole from you about your photos. What kind of camera were you using?
I've got a couple of them. I have a Nikon D7000, which is an older, it's about 2 models back from the one they're selling these days. And then I have a mirrorless Sony, which I really love the way it captures color, and the automatic focus on it, I think is superb.
All right, well, I think that wraps it up for the questions. Rick will be signing some more books. And at 8 o'clock, they'll be raffling off some special door prizes. So be sure to stick around for that.